Why?
Why? You ask that?
This erasure culminates in a devastating confrontation that is not merely a domestic dispute. It is a profound intersection of feudal jurisprudence, the semiotics of physical deformity, and the tension between meritocratic achievement and the aesthetic requirements of aristocratic legacy. By exhaustively deconstructing the dialogue between Tywin and Tyrion Lannister, we will expose how Tywin's obsession with visual perfection blinded him to his true heir, transforming the Lannister dynasty's greatest asset into the architect of its ultimate destruction. To understand the sheer desperation driving Tyrion into the Hand's Chamber, we must examine the post-Blackwater political vacuum. Acting as Hand of the King, Tyrion had exercised substantive authority through a coalition of sellswords, hill tribes, and personal alliances. However, his physical injury, a debilitating facial wound sustained during the battle, and his subsequent period of unconsciousness allowed Tywin Lannister to dismantle this coalition with surgical precision. Upon awakening, Tyrion discovers his military support has been dismissed, and credit for the city's salvation has been entirely absorbed by his father. This political marginalization serves as the essential context for Tyrion's demand for Casterly Rock. It is a strategic attempt to secure a permanent, legally unassailable power base before his influence is entirely liquidated. The confrontation that follows is Tyrion's insistence that the "Lannister pays his debts" mantra must finally be applied to his own father.
The badge looks good on you.
The scene opens with a subtle but lethal battle over symbols. Tyrion attempts to bridge the emotional distance through dark, cynical camaraderie, specifically highlighting the Hand of the King pin, the physical manifestation of his meritocratic achievement and administrative control.
Yes.
Tywin's response is a chilling, mocking chuckle. By deliberately mischaracterizing Tyrion's grueling, blood-soaked defense of the capital as a period of mere hedonistic happiness, Tywin initiates a systematic erasure of Tyrion's executive function. He refuses to acknowledge that Tyrion was a peer. Instead, he frames him as an indulgent child playing dress-up with the state's highest office. Tywin's physical actions within this beat, methodically drying ink and aggressively sealing letters, demonstrate his absolute bureaucratic dominance. He is an administrative mastermind who intends to command the realm with quills and ravens rather than swords. He immediately weaponizes Tyrion's personal vices to rewrite the historical narrative of the battle.
I gave you real power and authority. You chose to spend your days, as you always have, bedding harlots and drinking with thieves.
Rather than acknowledging that Tyrion utilized these so-called thieves, the hill tribes, and his unmatched strategic intellect to save their entire dynasty from Stannis Baratheon, Tywin frames his son's tenure as an exercise in catastrophic hedonism. This allows Tywin to legally and morally justify stripping Tyrion of his power by claiming the authority was squandered rather than usurped.
What do you want, Tyrion?
Why does everyone assume I want something?
Tyrion abruptly drops the political maneuvering to expose a raw emotional wound, utilizing sarcasm to mask a profound desperation for basic paternal affection. Tywin's response is a devastating display of utilitarian sociopathy.
Mr. Pycelle assured me your wounds were not fatal.
He treats the brutal, near-death experience of his son not as a moment of familial relief or trauma, but as a logistical update delivered by a servant. It highlights Tywin's chilling inability to view his children as autonomous human beings. To Tywin, the concept of family is an abstract legacy to be curated, while to Tyrion, it remains a desperate, unfulfilled source of belonging and validation.
I organized the defense of this city. I bled in the mud for our family. But what do I want? A little bloody gratitude would be a start.
Pushed to the brink, Tyrion unleashes his central meritocratic argument. He brutally contrasts his own visceral, physical sacrifices with the cowardly visual performance of the supposed ideal heir, King Joffrey. Tyrion lays out a flawless resume of statecraft and martial bravery, attempting to speak Tywin's language of transactional value. He is demanding that the ethical architecture of their house, where loyalty and service are paid in full, be honored internally. He expects a tangible, emotional reward for literally securing the survival of their bloodline.
Jugglers and singers require applause. You are a Lannister.
Tywin utterly rejects the concept of merit-based validation, viewing it as a grotesque violation of the feudal hierarchy. He equates Tyrion's deeply human desire for gratitude with the transactional behavior of low-class entertainers. Tywin asserts that for a Lannister, extreme sacrifice and suffering are simply the baseline requirements of existence. They are obligations of the blood, not achievements to be rewarded. By invoking his own battlefield wounds, Tywin reestablishes his patriarchal dominance, forcing Tyrion to state a cold, material demand rather than an emotional one.
You want Casterly Rock.
It is mine, by right.
Realizing emotional appeals are entirely useless, Tyrion pivots to the cold, undeniable framework of feudal jurisprudence. His demand is legally unassailable under male preference and succession laws. Jaime has taken a sacred oath to forswear all lands and titles, unequivocally removing him from the line of succession. As the only other true-born son, Tyrion is the heir by default. This is an incredibly dangerous, precise line of attack. Tyrion is intellectually cornering his father, forcing Tywin to confront the objective legal reality he has spent years trying to circumvent. Tywin refuses to accept the permanent loss of Jaime as his ideal successor, and Tyrion is forcing him to either uphold the law or break it entirely out of spite.
We'll find you accommodations more suited to your name. And I would let myself be consumed by maggots before mocking the family name and making you heir to Casterly Rock.
Tywin initially offers a pacifying, non-committal compromise, treating his brilliantly capable son like a middle management vassal. However, he concludes with the most brutal, definitive rejection of the entire series. Tywin views aristocratic power exclusively as a visual performance. To him, a deformed dwarf ruling the Westerlands shatters the flawless golden myth of their house. The dramatic irony of the word maggots is profound. In the novels, Tywin's corpse is described as rotting rapidly and emitting a foul, unavoidable stench on its funeral bier. His rigid aesthetic obsession ultimately causes the literal and metaphorical rot of his carefully curated legacy. The intellectual and political debate completely collapses into raw, unresolved psychological trauma. Tywin displaces the blame for his agonizing, lifelong grief over Joanna Lannister's death directly onto Tyrion. Furthermore, Tywin's specific litany of insults is a textbook display of psychological projection. He projects his own repressed lust, which is later exposed with Shae, and most damningly, he diminishes Tyrion's strategic genius as low cunning. Tywin must label it low because he cannot bear to admit that the child who most accurately reflects his own brilliant political mind is the one he aesthetically and biologically despises. Tywin executes the ultimate psychological strike, actively undermining Tyrion's fundamental biological identity. By suggesting Tyrion might be a bastard, exploiting the limits of men's laws, Tywin weaponizes uncertainty to deny his son any foundational familial security. Furthermore, he frames Tyrion not as an autonomous human being, but as a cosmic curse sent by the gods to teach him humility. This reveals the breathtaking depths of Tywin's narcissism. Even his son's painful physical existence is framed entirely around how it affects Tywin's personal pride and historical image. The scene concludes with a chilling act of sheer symbolic violence. By threatening to hang Tyrion's lover, Tywin reasserts absolute, lethal control over Tyrion's intimate autonomy. This directly invokes the horrific trauma of Tysha, Tyrion's first wife, whom Tywin brutally destroyed, signaling that Tyrion will never be allowed to seek independent human affection as long as he wears the Lannister name. By permanently denying Tyrion his legal birthright and explicitly threatening his life's only source of comfort, Tywin unknowingly writes his own death warrant, guaranteeing his eventual assassination in the Tower of the Hand. When analyzing this scene, we must acknowledge the crucial analytical divergence between George R.R. Martin's novels and the television adaptation. In A Storm of Swords, Tyrion lost half his nose and was rendered truly, objectively hideous. By giving Peter Dinklage a relatively clean facial scar on screen, the narrative shifts the focus away from objective deformity and powerfully highlights the depth of Tywin's internal, irrational prejudice. Furthermore, Tywin's rejection of Tyrion is a rejection of the Lannister mythos itself. House Lannister was not founded on honorable military conquest, but on legendary trickery when Lan the Clever swindled the Casterly family out of their castle without shedding a drop of blood. Tyrion, with his low cunning and intellectual adaptability, is the most accurate modern representation of the house's founder. Tywin's obsession with the visual perfection of the Proud Lion sigil prevents him from seeing that the imp is the only one capable of maintaining their legacy through the exact same wit that founded it. The confrontation in the Hand's Chamber acts as the original sin of the Lannister collapse. It marks the precise, devastating moment where Tyrion realizes that merit is an absolute illusion in a world that values visual performance above all else. Tywin Lannister spent his entire life ruthlessly building a dynasty, but his strategic blindness in this room proved fatal. By systematically alienating his only viable, legally legitimate successor over biological and aesthetic prejudices, Tywin effectively exported his own destruction. He ensured that the greatest political mind of House Lannister would eventually align with Daenerys Targaryen to burn his legacy to the ground. The maggots that Tywin feared were not found in Tyrion's dwarfism, but in Tywin's own inability to value his true son's intelligence over his own aesthetic pride.